Why does stress feel so powerful in our lives? According to Buddhist teachings, stress is not only created by problems in the world, it is deeply connected to the thoughts inside our mind. The Buddha taught that when the mind becomes attached to negative thoughts, stress begins to grow, but when we learn to observe our thoughts with awareness, the mind becomes calm and free. In this video, we will uncover the hidden link between stress and your thoughts, and explore how ancient Buddhist wisdom can help you quiet the mind and live with greater peace. In Buddhist teachings, there is a quiet truth that many people overlook. Most of the stress we experience in life is not created by the world around us. It is created by the world inside the mind. Imagine standing beside a calm lake at dawn. The water is still. The surface is clear. The sky reflects perfectly in it. But if a strong wind begins to blow, the lake becomes restless. The water ripples. The reflection disappears. Everything looks distorted. The lake itself has not changed. Only the movement on the surface has changed. The mind works in exactly the same way. At its deepest level, the mind is naturally peaceful, clear, open, still, but thoughts begin to move through it. A worry about tomorrow appears. A memory from the past rises. A fear whispers quietly inside. Then another thought appears, and another, and another. Slowly, these thoughts begin to stir the mind like wind across water. The surface becomes restless. Clarity fades. Peace disappears. And this is the moment when stress begins to grow. The Buddha taught that the mind constantly creates mental formations, patterns of thinking that shape how we experience life. When the mind clings to certain thoughts, those thoughts begin to feel real. A small concern becomes a large worry. A simple mistake becomes a heavy burden. A passing comment becomes something we replay in the mind again and again, but the event itself may have been very small. What creates suffering? What is the story the mind builds around it? This is why Buddhist wisdom reminds us that stress rarely comes from the event itself. It comes from the way the mind reacts to it. The Buddha explained this through a powerful teaching often called the two arrows. The first arrow is the difficulty life sends our way. This might be disappointment, loss, failure, unexpected change. But the second arrow is something we create ourselves. The second arrow is the mind repeating, "Why did this happen to me? This shouldn't be happening. What if everything goes wrong?" These thoughts strike the mind again and again, and often the second arrow causes far more pain than the first. But here is the wisdom that Buddhist teachings gently reveal. Thoughts are not permanent. They are not solid. They are not fixed. They are simply movements of the mind, like clouds drifting through the sky. When we believe every thought, the clouds grow dark and heavy. But when we observe thoughts without holding them too tightly, they begin to pass naturally. The sky never fights the clouds. It allows them to move. In the same way, the mind does not need to fight every thought. It only needs to see them clearly. And the moment we begin to see our thoughts instead of becoming trapped inside them, something remarkable happens. The storm inside the mind begins to soften. The waves begin to settle. The lake becomes calm again. And within that calmness, we begin to rediscover something that was never truly lost. Peace. A quiet, steady peace that has always been waiting beneath the surface of the mind. In the teachings of the Buddha, one of the most liberating insights is the understanding that thoughts are not reality. Yet most people live their entire lives believing every thought that appears in their mind, as if each one were an unquestionable truth. When a fearful thought arises, the heart becomes anxious. When a doubtful thought appears, confidence begins to fade. When a negative thought repeats itself often enough, the mind slowly begins to accept it as fact. But Buddhist wisdom invites us to look deeper. It teaches that thoughts are simply mental events that arise and pass away. They are not permanent, they are not fixed, and they are not the true nature of who we are. Just as the sky allows clouds to pass without becoming the clouds themselves, the mind has the ability to observe thoughts without becoming trapped inside them. However, the habit of the mind is to grasp onto thoughts and build entire worlds around them. A small idea appears, and the mind begins to expand it. A brief worry arises, and the mind turns it into a long chain of fears. The more the mind feeds these thoughts with attention, the stronger they become. Slowly, the mind constructs an invisible prison made entirely of ideas. This is why stress often feels so real and overwhelming. It is not because the present moment is unbearable, but because the mind keeps replaying possibilities, worries, and imagined outcomes. A single thought about the future can create 100 new thoughts about what might go wrong. Each one adds another layer of tension, another ripple in the lake of the mind. The Buddha understood this pattern with extraordinary clarity. He taught that the mind has a natural tendency to wander and attach itself to thoughts. Without awareness, the mind moves endlessly between memories of the past and worries about the future. Rarely does it rest in the simplicity of the present moment. But the present moment is the only place where true peace can exist. In this moment, there is only breathing, awareness, and the simple experience of being alive. The body is here, the breath is moving gently, and life is unfolding one moment at a time. Yet the mind often ignores this peaceful reality because it is busy chasing thoughts. When we begin to observe the mind through mindfulness, something remarkable becomes visible. Thoughts arise spontaneously without our control. They appear suddenly, linger for a short time, and then fade away. Another thought replaces the previous one, and the process continues endlessly. When seen clearly, this flow of thoughts begins to lose its authority. Instead of believing every thought, we begin to watch them as passing visitors. A thought of fear arises, and we simply notice it. A thought of doubt appears, and we observe it without judgment. A thought of anger moves through the mind, and we allow it to pass without feeding it with more thinking. In Buddhist meditation, this practice is often described as developing awareness of the mind. Awareness creates a gentle distance between the observer and the thought itself. The thought may still appear, but it no longer controls the entire inner world. The mind begins to experience a quiet freedom that was previously hidden. This freedom grows stronger with patience. Each moment of awareness weakens the habit of automatic thinking. Each moment of mindful observation reminds the mind that thoughts are not commands that must be obeyed. They are simply movements within consciousness. Over time, the mind begins to settle naturally. The storm of thoughts becomes less intense. The spaces between thoughts become wider and more peaceful. In those quiet spaces, a deeper sense of clarity begins to appear. Buddhist teachings often compare this clarity to a mirror. A mirror reflects whatever appears in front of it, yet it does not cling to the images it reflects. When a beautiful scene appears, the mirror reflects it without attachment. When an unpleasant image appears, the mirror reflects it without resistance. In the same way, a trained mind learns to experience thoughts without clinging to them or fighting them. When this understanding deepens, stress begins to lose much of its power. The mind no longer feels trapped inside every passing idea. Instead, it learns to remain open and spacious, like a wide sky that allows clouds to drift peacefully across its vastness. Through this simple but profound realization, we begin to see the hidden truth that the Buddha revealed long ago. The mind does not have to believe every thought it produces. When awareness becomes stronger than habit, the mind slowly returns to its natural state of balance and peace. In the quiet teachings of Buddhism, the mind is often compared to a restless monkey moving endlessly from branch to branch. It rarely stays still, rarely rests, and rarely settles into the calm clarity that exists beneath its constant movement. This restless wandering of the mind is one of the hidden reasons stress becomes such a powerful force in human life. The moment the mind wakes in the morning, it begins moving in many directions. It begins to think about responsibilities, unfinished tasks, conversations that might happen, and situations that may or may not occur. Before the day has even fully begun, the mind may already be carrying the weight of imagined problems. This pattern continues throughout the day. While walking, the mind is not fully aware of walking. While eating, the mind is not fully present with the taste of food. Even while resting, the mind may still be busy traveling through memories of the past or projecting fears into the future. Because of this constant movement, The mind rarely experiences the simplicity of the present moment, yet Buddhist wisdom teaches that the present moment is the only place where true peace can be found. Stress often grows when the mind refuses to remain where life is actually happening. When the mind drifts into the past, it begins to replay events that cannot be changed. It remembers mistakes, regrets, and difficult moments that have already ended. The more these memories are repeated, the heavier they begin to feel. Even though the events are long gone, the mind continues to experience them again and again. When the mind moves toward the future, another form of tension appears. The mind begins imagining possibilities, uncertain outcomes, and situations that might create difficulty. Many of these imagined problems never actually happen, yet the mind treats them as if they are already real. This endless cycle of anticipation and worry slowly builds the feeling of stress. The Buddha observed this pattern with great compassion and understanding. He saw that the mind, when left untrained, naturally moves between regret and fear. It clings to what has already passed and becomes anxious about what has not yet arrived. In doing so, the mind forgets the quiet stability of the present moment. To help free the mind from this cycle, the Buddha introduced the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the simple yet profound act of returning awareness to the present moment again and again. It means observing what is happening right now without becoming lost in the endless movement of thoughts. When mindfulness begins to grow, the mind slowly learns a new way of experiencing life. Instead of chasing every thought that appears, the mind begins to pause and observe. It becomes aware of breathing, aware of sensations in the body, and aware of the gentle rhythm of life unfolding moment by moment. At first, the wandering habit of the mind may still be strong. Thoughts continue to appear and attempt to pull attention away from the present, but each time awareness returns to the breath, the mind becomes slightly calmer. Each moment of mindful observation strengthens the ability to remain grounded. Over time, the mind begins to change in subtle but powerful ways. The constant rush of thoughts begins to slow down. The space between thoughts becomes wider. Moments of quiet awareness appear more frequently throughout the day. In these moments of stillness, something remarkable becomes clear. The mind discovers that peace was never far away. It was simply hidden beneath layers of restless thinking. Just as muddy water becomes clear when it is allowed to settle, the mind also becomes clear when it is no longer constantly stirred by uncontrolled thoughts. Buddhist teachings often remind us that the mind is like a garden. If the garden is left unattended, wild plants will grow everywhere. Worries, fears, and distractions begin to fill every corner of the mind. But when the garden is cared for with patience and awareness, it slowly becomes a place of balance and harmony. Mindfulness is the gentle act of tending to this inner garden. With each moment of awareness, the mind learns to recognize thoughts without immediately following them. Instead of being pulled endlessly from one branch of thought to another, the mind begins to rest in a deeper sense of stability. As this stability grows, stress begins to lose its intensity. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to appear more manageable. Challenges still exist, but the mind is no longer trapped inside endless reactions to them. This is one of the quiet transformations described in Buddhist wisdom. The outer world may remain unpredictable and constantly changing, yet the inner world can become steady and peaceful. When the mind learns to remain present, the storms of thought lose their power, and a deeper calm begins to guide the experience of life. Within the heart of Buddhist philosophy lies a profound insight about the nature of human suffering. The Buddha taught that the deeper cause of stress is not simply the thoughts that arise in the mind, but the way the mind clings to those thoughts and the expectations it builds around them. This clinging is known in Buddhism as attachment, and it quietly shapes the way many people experience the world every single day. Attachment begins with a simple desire for things to be a certain way. The mind forms an image of how life should unfold, how people should behave, and how situations should resolve. These expectations often feel harmless at first, but they slowly grow stronger as the mind repeats them again and again. The mind begins to believe that happiness depends on these expectations being fulfilled exactly as imagined. However, life moves according to its own rhythm, not according to the plans created by the mind. Circumstances change, people act in unexpected ways, and situations evolve beyond our control. When reality begins to move in a different direction than our expectations, tension begins to appear. The mind resists what is happening and holds tightly to what it believes should be happening instead. This resistance is where stress quietly takes root. The mind becomes caught between two worlds, the reality of the present moment and the imagined version of reality it wishes to hold on to. The stronger the attachment to the imagined outcome, the greater the feeling of stress when life moves differently. The Buddha observed that this pattern exists in nearly every area of human experience. People become attached to success, believing their worth depends on achievement. They become attached to approval, believing their happiness depends on how others perceive them. They become attached to comfort, believing peace can only exist when circumstances are perfect and predictable. But the world does not promise permanence or certainty. Buddhist teachings emphasize the principle of impermanence, the understanding that everything in life is constantly changing. Every moment passes into the next, every experience transforms, and every situation eventually shifts into something new. When the mind forgets this truth, it attempts to freeze life into a fixed form. It tries to hold on to pleasant experiences and push away unpleasant ones. Yet the more tightly the mind tries to control the flow of life, the more it begins to feel tension and frustration. To illustrate this, Buddhist teachers often use the image of holding sand in the palm of the hand. If the hand remains open and relaxed, the sand rests gently in place. But when the hand tightens in an attempt to grip the sand firmly, the grains begin to slip away between the fingers. In the same way, the tighter the mind tries to grasp life, the more difficult it becomes to experience peace. Letting go of attachment does not mean becoming indifferent or uncaring. Instead, it means learning to experience life with openness and flexibility. It means appreciating moments of happiness without demanding that they last forever. It means facing challenges without believing they will define the entire future. Through mindfulness and awareness, the mind begins to recognize the difference between experiencing life and clinging to it. When pleasant moments arise, the mind learns to appreciate them fully, while understanding that they will eventually change. When difficult moments appear, the mind learns to observe them with patience rather than resistance. This gentle shift in perspective slowly transforms the way stress operates within the mind. Instead of reacting with tension whenever life moves in an unexpected direction, the mind begins to respond with curiosity and acceptance. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to appear as temporary experiences within the larger flow of life. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true peace does not come from controlling the world, but from understanding its nature. When the mind sees clearly that change is an essential part of existence, it stops fighting against the movement of life. Like a river flowing around stones in its path, the mind learns to move with circumstances rather than resisting them. As attachment loosens, the heart becomes lighter. The endless pressure to force life into a perfect shape slowly dissolves. The mind discovers that peace is not found in holding on to every desired outcome, but in allowing life to unfold naturally. In this way, Buddhist teachings reveal another hidden link between stress and thought. It is not only the thoughts themselves that create tension, but the attachment that follows them. When the mind clings tightly to expectations, stress grows stronger. But when the mind learns to release its grip, a deeper sense of freedom begins to appear. This freedom is quiet yet powerful. It allows the mind to remain steady even when circumstances change. It allows awareness to remain open and spacious instead of shrinking under the weight of expectations. And through this understanding, the mind slowly returns to its natural balance, where peace exists not because life is perfect, but because the mind has learned how to flow with its constant transformation. One of the deepest insights within Buddhist philosophy is the realization that much of human stress grows from the mind's desire to control the flow of life. The mind often believes that peace will arrive once everything becomes predictable, once every situation moves exactly as expected, and once every outcome aligns perfectly with personal desires. Yet the nature of existence is far more fluid than the mind wishes to accept, and it is this misunderstanding that quietly feeds the experience of tension. From an early age, people learn to build plans, expectations, and imagined futures, the mind creates detailed pictures of how life should unfold, what success should look like, and how relationships and circumstances should develop over time. These visions begin to feel solid and reliable, almost as if the future itself can be shaped entirely by the force of personal intention. But life, as the Buddha repeatedly emphasized, follows the law of impermanence and interdependence, meaning that every moment arises from countless conditions beyond any single person's control. Because of this reality, the mind's attempt to control everything eventually leads to frustration. A person may carefully plan every step toward a goal, only to encounter unexpected obstacles. A conversation may not unfold as anticipated. A situation that once felt stable may suddenly change. When these moments occur, the mind reacts with resistance because reality no longer matches the image it created. This resistance is where stress quietly deepens. The mind continues to insist that things should be different, replaying thoughts about what should have happened instead of accepting what has already unfolded. The more the mind argues with reality, the more it feels trapped within its own tension. The Buddha understood that this struggle comes from a misunderstanding of how life operates. Rather than existing as a fixed structure that can be controlled completely, life is more like a river that flows continuously through changing landscapes. The river does not stop when it meets a rock or an unexpected bend in its path. Instead, it moves around the obstacle, adjusting its direction while continuing its journey. When the mind attempts to control every movement of this river, it becomes exhausted. But when the mind learns to move with the river, rather than against it, a new form of freedom begins to appear. This freedom is not about abandoning responsibility or effort, but about understanding the difference between wise action and unnecessary struggle. Buddhist teachings encourage individuals to act with mindfulness and intention, while recognizing that the final outcome of events is shaped by countless factors beyond personal control. When effort is made with awareness but without rigid attachment to results, the mind remains balanced regardless of how circumstances unfold. This perspective gradually dissolves the illusion that peace depends on perfect control. Instead, peace begins to arise from a deeper trust in the unfolding nature of life. The mind understands that it can respond to situations with clarity and compassion without needing to dominate every detail of existence. Meditation practices within Buddhism often help reveal this truth in a direct and experiential way. When sitting quietly and observing the breath, one quickly notices that the breath moves naturally without any need for force. It rises, falls, and flows in its own rhythm. Attempting to control every breath makes the experience tense and uncomfortable, but allowing the breath to move freely creates a sense of ease. This simple observation reflects a larger truth about life itself. Many experiences unfold more harmoniously when the mind stops trying to force them into rigid patterns. When awareness replaces control, the mind becomes more flexible, open, and resilient. Through continued mindfulness, the mind also begins to recognize that the desire for control often arises from fear. The mind fears uncertainty, fears change, and fears the possibility of discomfort. In response to these fears, it attempts to build structures of certainty through planning and expectation. While planning can be useful, the attachment to certainty becomes a source of tension because life cannot guarantee such stability. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true stability is not found in controlling the outer world, but in cultivating steadiness within the inner world. When the mind develops awareness, patience, and understanding, it becomes capable of meeting any situation with calmness. Even when circumstances shift unexpectedly, the mind remains grounded because it no longer depends on rigid expectations for its sense of peace. This transformation does not occur instantly. It develops gradually as mindfulness deepens and insight grows stronger. Each moment of awareness reveals another layer of the mind's habits, including its tendency to cling to control. As these habits become clearer, they begin to loosen their hold. Eventually, the mind begins to experience a new relationship with life. Instead of struggling against uncertainty, it becomes curious about the unfolding process of each moment. Instead of fearing change, it begins to recognize change as the natural movement of existence. In this state of understanding, stress begins to lose much of its power. The mind no longer feels responsible for controlling the entire course of life. Instead, it participates in life with openness, wisdom, and compassion. Through this shift in perspective, the teachings of the Buddha reveal another hidden connection between stress and thought. Stress grows strongest when the mind insists on controlling what cannot be controlled. But when the mind learns to release this illusion and trust the natural flow of life, it discovers a quieter and more stable form of peace that remains present even in the midst of uncertainty. In the teachings of the Buddha, one principle appears again and again as the key to transforming the mind and freeing it from unnecessary stress. This principle is known as mindful awareness, and it is often described as the gentle light that allows the mind to see itself clearly. Without awareness, the mind moves automatically through its patterns of thinking, reacting to every thought and emotion as if they were commands that must be followed. With awareness, however, the mind begins to observe these patterns from a place of calm understanding. Most people experience their thoughts as something that simply happens to them. A thought arises suddenly, and the mind immediately follows it without question. If the thought is fearful, the body tightens and anxiety appears. If the thought is critical, the heart becomes heavy and self-doubt grows stronger. Because the mind reacts so quickly, it often feels as though thoughts have complete authority over inner experience. Buddhist meditation reveals that this automatic relationship between thought and reaction is not fixed or permanent. Instead, it is a habit that has been repeated for many years. Just as a path through a forest becomes clearer each time someone walks along it, the mind strengthens certain patterns each time it follows the same thoughts again and again. Worry strengthens the habit of worrying, anger strengthens the habit of reacting with anger, and fear strengthens the habit of expecting danger. Mindful awareness begins to change this process by introducing a moment of observation before reaction occurs. When awareness is present, the mind notices the thought as it appears. Instead of immediately believing the thought or becoming absorbed in it, the mind simply recognizes that a thought has arisen. This small moment of recognition creates a powerful shift in the way experience unfolds. Through this practice, the mind begins to understand that thoughts are not permanent features of reality. They arise due to many conditions, remain for a short time, and eventually disappear. When the mind watches this process carefully, it begins to see the constant movement of thoughts as clearly as waves rising and falling on the surface of the ocean. This understanding gradually weakens the habit of reacting automatically. A thought of worry may still appear, but the mind now observes it with curiosity rather than fear. A thought of anger may arise, but awareness notices the feeling without immediately turning it into action. With each moment of mindful observation, the mind gains a little more freedom from the patterns that once controlled it. The Buddha often compared this process to lighting a lamp in a dark room. When the room is dark, objects cannot be seen clearly, and confusion easily arises. But when a lamp is lit, the shapes and forms within the room become visible. In the same way, awareness illuminates the movements of the mind so they can be understood rather than blindly followed. As awareness grows stronger, the mind also begins to notice the subtle connection between thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. A stressful thought may create tension in the chest or tightness in the shoulders. An anxious expectation may cause the breath to become shallow and uneven. By observing these reactions carefully, the mind begins to recognize how closely the body and mind are connected. This recognition allows the mind to respond differently to stressful thoughts. Instead of feeding the thought with more thinking, the mind may return to the breath, allowing the body to relax naturally. The breath becomes an anchor that brings awareness back to the present moment, whenever the mind begins to wander into worry or tension. Over time, this simple practice begins to reshape the inner landscape of the mind. The endless chain of reactive thinking becomes less powerful because awareness interrupts the cycle before it can grow stronger. Moments of calm observation become more frequent, creating spaces of stillness between thoughts. Within these spaces, a deeper form of peace begins to appear. It is not the fragile peace that depends on everything going perfectly in life, but a steady peace that arises from understanding the nature of the mind itself. The mind learns that thoughts will always come and go, just as clouds move across the sky, but awareness remains present and stable beneath them. The Buddha taught that cultivating this awareness is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. It transforms the way life is experienced from moment to moment. Situations that once created immediate stress begin to feel different because the mind no longer reacts blindly to every thought. Instead, it observes, understands, and responds with greater wisdom. This transformation does not remove challenges from life, but it changes the way the mind meets them. When difficulties arise, awareness allows the mind to remain steady rather than overwhelmed. When uncertainty appears, awareness provides clarity instead of confusion. Gradually, the mind begins to experience a quiet confidence in its ability to face whatever conditions arise. It understands that stress does not have to control every experience, because awareness creates space between thought and reaction. Through patient practice, the light of mindfulness grows brighter within the mind. The habits of worry and tension lose their dominance, and a deeper sense of calm becomes more familiar. This calm is not something that needs to be forced or created from outside sources. It is the natural state of a mind that sees clearly. In this way, Buddhist wisdom reveals another important connection between thoughts and stress. Stress grows strongest when thoughts move unnoticed and uncontrolled through the mind. But when awareness begins to illuminate these thoughts, the mind gains the freedom to observe them without becoming trapped within them. Through this understanding, the path toward inner peace becomes clearer with every moment of mindful awareness. In the final stages of understanding the relationship between stress and thought, Buddhist teachings reveal a deeper transformation that becomes possible for the human mind. This transformation is not simply about reducing stress or calming temporary emotions. It is about discovering a completely different way of relating to thoughts, experiences, and the ever-changing nature of life itself. For most people, the mind feels like something that constantly reacts to the world. Events occur, and the mind immediately forms judgments about them. A pleasant situation appears, and the mind tries to hold on to it. An unpleasant situation arises, and the mind struggles to push it away. This constant cycle of attraction and resistance slowly creates tension within the mind, because reality never remains fixed for very long. The Buddha observed that the root of this struggle lies in misunderstanding the nature of the mind. Many people believe that their thoughts define who they are. When a negative thought appears, they assume something is wrong with them. When a fearful idea enters the mind, they believe it represents reality. Over time, this identification with thought becomes so strong that the mind begins to feel imprisoned by its own activity. However, Buddhist wisdom offers a radically different perspective. It teaches that thoughts are simply movements within awareness, not the true identity of the person experiencing them. Just as waves move across the surface of the ocean without altering the depth of the water beneath them, thoughts move across the surface of the mind without defining its true nature. When this understanding begins to deepen through mindfulness and meditation, a remarkable shift slowly unfolds. The mind no longer feels compelled to chase every thought or resist every uncomfortable emotion. Instead, it begins to rest within awareness itself. Thoughts may continue to arise, but they no longer carry the same authority they once held. This shift is often described in Buddhist teachings as the discovery of inner spaciousness. The mind becomes like an open sky that allows clouds to appear and disappear naturally. Some clouds may be dark and heavy, while others may be light and peaceful, yet the sky itself remains vast and unaffected by their passing. As this spacious awareness becomes more familiar, the experience of stress begins to transform. Situations that once triggered immediate anxiety are now met with calm observation. The mind understands that thoughts about the situation are not the situation itself. Because of this clarity, reactions become less automatic and more thoughtful. Another important realization also begins to emerge. The mind sees that every experience in life shares the same fundamental quality of impermanence. Emotions rise and fall, circumstances appear and fade, and even the strongest thoughts eventually dissolve. Nothing remains exactly the same from one moment to the next. When this truth is understood deeply, the mind gradually releases its habit of clinging to experiences. It no longer demands that pleasant moments last forever, and it no longer believes that difficult moments will remain permanently. Instead, the mind begins to trust the natural rhythm of change that moves through every aspect of existence. This trust brings an unexpected sense of ease. Life continues to present challenges, responsibilities, and uncertainties, yet the mind approaches them with a quieter confidence. Rather than being overwhelmed by every difficulty, the mind recognizes each moment as part of the larger flow of life. Buddhist teachings often describe this stage of understanding as a form of inner freedom. It does not require withdrawing from the world or escaping everyday responsibilities. Instead, it arises from seeing clearly how thoughts operate and learning not to become entangled in them. With this clarity, compassion also begins to grow naturally. When the mind understands its own patterns of stress and confusion, it begins to recognize that others are experiencing similar struggles. Instead of reacting with frustration or judgment, the heart becomes more patient and understanding toward the difficulties faced by others. This compassion further softens the mind and reduces the tendency to create unnecessary tension. Relationships become less driven by expectation and more guided by kindness and presence. Interactions with others feel lighter because the mind is no longer carrying the heavy burden of constant self-centered worry. Over time, the practice of awareness, patience, and understanding continues to deepen. The mind becomes more stable even in the face of uncertainty. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer dominate the entire inner experience. Emotions still appear, but they move through awareness like passing weather rather than permanent storms. The Buddha taught that this state of balance represents the natural potential of every human mind. Peace is not something that must be created from outside sources or obtained through perfect circumstances. It already exists within the mind as a quiet possibility waiting to be discovered. The path toward this discovery is simple, though it requires patience and practice. Each moment of mindfulness weakens the habit of being controlled by thought. Each moment of awareness reveals the spacious nature of the mind more clearly. Each moment of letting go brings the mind closer to its natural state of calm and freedom. When this understanding matures fully, the relationship between stress and thought becomes clear. Stress was never an unavoidable part of life itself. It was the result of how the mind interpreted and clung to its own thoughts. Once the mind learns to see these thoughts with wisdom and compassion, their power begins to fade. What remains is a quiet clarity that allows life to be experienced fully without becoming overwhelmed by it. The mind moves through changing circumstances with the same steady awareness that watches the breath rise and fall. Even in moments of challenge, there is a deeper sense of stability beneath the surface. In this way, Buddhist teachings reveal a profound truth about the nature of the mind. Freedom is not found in eliminating every difficulty from life, but in understanding the mind so deeply that difficulties no longer imprison it. When thoughts are seen clearly and allowed to pass naturally, the mind returns to the peaceful openness that has always been present within it. The Buddha once shared a simple yet profound truth about the human mind. He taught that the mind, when left unobserved, can easily become its own source of suffering. Thoughts arise endlessly, and when we cling to them, we begin to carry a burden that was never meant to stay with us. But when the mind learns to watch thoughts with awareness instead of attachment, something beautiful begins to unfold. The storms that once felt overwhelming slowly begin to quiet. The endless noise of worry begins to soften, and within that quiet space, a deeper peace becomes visible. This peace is not something that must be created or chased. It has always been present beneath the surface of the mind, waiting for the moment when awareness becomes strong enough to see it. Just as the sky remains vast and open behind every passing cloud, the mind also holds a natural stillness beneath every passing thought. The teachings of the Buddha remind us that stress is not the true nature of the mind. Stress appears when thoughts are believed without question, and when the mind clings tightly to every worry it creates. But when we begin to observe the movement of thought with patience and wisdom, those thoughts lose their power to control us. Each moment of mindfulness becomes a step toward freedom. Each breath taken with awareness becomes a reminder that peace is never far away. Even in the middle of life's challenges, the mind has the ability to return to the present moment and rediscover its quiet balance. The path taught by the Buddha is not about escaping life or avoiding difficulty. It is about learning to see clearly, understanding the nature of thought, and allowing the mind to rest in its natural state of calm awareness. When this understanding deepens, the mind no longer feels trapped by stress or overwhelmed by every passing idea. Instead, it moves through life with a gentle steadiness, meeting each moment with clarity, compassion, and presence. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson hidden within Buddhist wisdom. The peace we search for in the world has always existed within the mind itself. All that is required is the willingness to pause, observe, and allow the restless movement of thought to settle. When the mind becomes quiet, even for a moment, we begin to realize something extraordinary. The peace we have been searching for was never outside of us. It has always been here, waiting patiently within the stillness of the mind.